My husband disappeared on a Tuesday morning. And when I say disappeared, I don't mean he went to buy cigarettes and never came back. I mean he took everything we had built in 12 years of marriage, sold it all behind my back, and vanished like smoke. The house? Gone. The car? Gone. Our savings account? Completely empty. Even the small jewelry box my grandmother left me was missing from the drawer where I kept it hidden. I'm going to tell you this story because what happened next changed my entire life. And the person who helped me get back on my feet was someone my ex-husband would never have expected in a million years.
My name is Helena, and this is the true story of how I lost everything and rebuilt my life from nothing. Let me start from the beginning. I met Roberto when I was 23 years old. I was working as a receptionist at a hotel in Sao Paulo, and he came in one day for a business meeting. He was charming, well-dressed, confident. He asked me out for coffee that same week. Within 6 months, we were living together. A year later, we got married. Roberto worked in sales. At least, that's what he told me. He was always traveling, always closing deals, always promising that the next big commission was just around the corner. And I believed him. Why?
But there were signs. Signs I ignored because I was young and in love and stupid. He never wanted to combine our bank accounts completely. He always kept separate credit cards. When I asked to see our financial statements, he'd get defensive and say I didn't trust him. So I stopped asking. Years went by. We moved from Sao Paulo to Recife because Roberto said there were better opportunities here. We rented a small apartment in Boa Viagem. I got a job at a local bookstore. Roberto continued his sales work, or whatever it was he actually did during those long trips away from home. Then one day, about 2 years ago, Roberto came home excited, more excited than I'd seen him in years. He said he had found an investment opportunity. A friend of his was starting a business, something related to importing electronics from China. Roberto said if we invested our savings now, we could double our money in less than a year. I was hesitant. We had been saving that money for almost a decade. It was supposed to be for a down payment on a house, for our future, for the children we talked about having someday. But Roberto was persuasive. He showed me spreadsheets. He introduced me to his friend over a video call. Everything looked legitimate. And more than anything, I wanted to believe my husband. I wanted to believe we were finally going to have the life he'd always promised me. So I said yes. We took almost all our savings and gave it to Roberto's friend. 60,000 reais. Everything we had worked for. The first few months, Roberto gave me updates. The business was doing well. Shipments were arriving. Profits were being made. He even showed me a few bank transfers to prove the money was growing. I felt relieved. Maybe this was finally our big break. But then the updates stopped. When I asked Roberto about the investment, he became irritable. He said these things take time. He said I needed to be patient. He said I was stressing him out with all my questions. Then came that Tuesday morning. I woke up and Roberto wasn't in bed. That wasn't unusual because he often left early for meetings, but something felt wrong. The apartment was too quiet, too empty. I walked into the living room and immediately noticed things were missing. The laptop we shared was gone. The small TV we had in the bedroom was gone. I ran to our closet, and half of Roberto's clothes were missing. My heart started racing. I grabbed my phone and called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. I sent messages. No response. I called his mother. She hadn't heard from him. I called the friend he supposedly invested our money with. The number was disconnected. That's when the panic really set in. I ran to my laptop to check our bank accounts. I logged into my personal account first. Empty. Completely empty. I had kept about 3,000 reals in there for emergencies. Gone. Then I tried to log into the joint savings account we had opened together. The password didn't work. He had changed it. I called the bank immediately. After verifying my identity, they told me the account had been closed 3 days earlier. All the money had been withdrawn. By Roberto. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. I actually had to sit down because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Everything was gone. Everything. But it got worse. That afternoon, I received a call from our landlord. Roberto hadn't paid rent in 3 months. The landlord had been patient because we'd been good tenants, but he needed the money now or we would be evicted. 3 months of unpaid rent. That was almost 5,000 reals I didn't have. Then I got another call, this one from a furniture store. Apparently, Roberto had been buying things on credit using my name as a cosigner. He hadn't made a single payment. They wanted their money. About 7,000 reals worth of debt I knew nothing about. Over the next few days, more calls came, more debts, more lies uncovered. Roberto had been living a completely different life behind my back. He owed money to friends, he had taken out loans, he had sold things that didn't belong to him, and now he was gone. And I was left holding the bag. I tried everything to find him. I filed a police report, but they said unless there was evidence of a crime, there wasn't much they could do. Technically, the money in our joint account belonged to both of us. The debts he signed in my name were legal because I had agreed to be a cosigner years ago for other purchases. I had no legal ground to stand on.
I called every number I had for his friends and family. Nobody knew where he was, or if they did, they weren't telling me. His mother cried on the phone and said she didn't understand how her son could do this. But she couldn't help me financially. She was living on a small pension. Within 2 weeks, I was evicted from our apartment. I packed what little I had left into 2 suitcases and a backpack. I had nowhere to go. No money. No family in Recife. No real friends, because Roberto had always kept me isolated. Always said we didn't need other people, that we had each other. I spent the first night sleeping on a bench at Parque da Jaquera. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. I had maybe 50 reais in my wallet, and a phone that was about to be disconnected because I couldn't pay the bill. I was 35 years old and homeless. The next morning, I went to the bookstore where I worked. I explained the situation to my boss. She was sympathetic, but said she couldn't give me an advance on my salary. The bookstore was small and barely making ends meet as it was. She did let me work extra hours, which helped, but my monthly salary was only about 1,500 reais, not nearly enough to rent a new place, especially with all the debt collectors calling me daily. I spent the next few nights sleeping in cheap hostels, the kind where you share a room with 5 other people and hope nobody steals your stuff while you sleep. I showered at public beaches. I ate 1 meal a day, usually just rice and beans from the cheapest restaurant I could find. I was at my lowest point. I had lost everything. My marriage, my home, my savings, my dignity. I thought about giving up. I really did. I thought about just walking into the ocean and not coming back. But then something happened that changed everything. I was sitting on the beach in Boa Viagem one evening, watching the sunset and trying to figure out what to do next. I was crying, not even trying to hide it anymore. And this older woman came and sat down next to me. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, watching the waves with me. Then, very quietly, she asked if I was okay. I almost laughed. Was I okay? No, I wasn't. And I had nothing left to lose. Maybe it was because she had kind eyes. I don't know, but I told her everything. The whole story just poured out of me. When she finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "I know exactly how you feel. The same thing happened to me 30 years ago." Her name was Dona Margarita, and her story was eerily similar to mine. Her husband had taken all their money, sold their house, and disappeared. She was left with nothing but debt and two small children to feed. No family to help her, no education, no job skills. But she survived, and not just survived, but thrived. She told me that after her husband left, she started cleaning houses to make money. Any work she could find. She saved every penny. She put her children through school, and eventually she opened her own small business, a sewing shop that made custom clothes. Now, 30 years later, she owned 3 shops in Recife. She had paid off all her debts, her children were grown and successful, and she had built a life for herself that her ex-husband could never have given her. I asked her how she did it, how she found the strength to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. She smiled and said, "Because I realized that my worth wasn't tied to him. He took my money, but he didn't take me. I was still here, still capable, still strong. I just had to remember that." Then she did something incredible. She offered me a job. She said she needed someone to help manage one of her shops, someone to handle the customers and keep track of orders. She said she could pay me 2,000 reais a month to start, plus commission on sales. And she had a small room above the shop that I could stay in rent-free until I got back on my feet. I almost didn't believe her. Why would this stranger help me? She barely knew me. But she explained that 30 years ago, someone had helped her in the same way. A woman at her church had given her a place to stay and helped her find work. And Dona Margarita had promised herself that if she ever had the means, she would do the same for someone else. I started working for her the next day. The shop was in Casa Amarela, a neighborhood I'd never spent much time in. The work was simple but steady. I greeted customers, took measurements, helped them choose fabrics, processed orders. Donna Margarita taught me everything about the business. She was patient and kind, but also firm. She expected me to work hard, and I did. Living in that small room above the shop was the first time I'd felt safe in weeks. It wasn't much, just a bed, a small table, and a shared bathroom down the hall. But it was mine. Nobody could take it away from me. The first few months were hard. I was still getting calls from debt collectors. I was still trying to process the betrayal and the loss. Some days I could barely get out of bed, but Donna Margarita never gave up on me. She would bring me coffee in the morning and sit with me before the shop opened. She would tell me stories about her own struggles, her own moments of doubt. She reminded me that healing takes time. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. I started making friends with the regular customers. I learned how to sew basic repairs, then more complicated alterations. I started earning commission on sales, which meant I could save a little money each month. After 6 months, I had saved enough to start paying off the smallest debts. It wasn't much, just a few hundred reais here and there, but it felt like progress. It felt like I was taking back control of my life. After a year, Donna Margarita promoted me to manager of the shop. My salary increased to 3,000 reais a month, plus higher commission rates. I moved into a better room, one with my own bathroom and a small kitchen. I bought a used phone to replace the one that had been disconnected. I started building a life again. But the best part? I started getting good at what I did. Really good. I discovered I had a talent for understanding what customers wanted, for helping them feel confident in their clothing choices. I learned the business inside and out. I started suggesting new products, new services, and the shop's revenue grew because of it. Donna Margarita noticed. About 18 months after I started working for her, she made me an offer. She wanted to open a 4th shop, and she wanted me to run it, not just as a manager, but as a partner. She would provide the initial investment, but I would own 20% of the business. Any profits would be split accordingly. I couldn't believe it. Me, a partner in a business, the woman who'd been homeless just a year and a half earlier. But Donna Margarita believed in me. She said she saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself yet. She said I had the drive and the intelligence to succeed. I just needed the opportunity. So I said yes. We opened the fourth shop in Boa Viagem, ironically just a few blocks from where I used to live with Roberto. The shop specialized in formal wear and alterations for weddings and special events. It was my idea, based on what I had learned about the market. The shop did well, really well. Within the first year, we had a steady stream of customers and we were profitable. My share of the profits was more than I'd ever made working for someone else. I was finally able to pay off all the debts Roberto had left me with. Every single one. That feeling, making that final payment and knowing I was free from that burden, was better than anything I can describe. It felt like closing a chapter of my life that had been holding me back. But the story doesn't end there, because about 2 years after Roberto disappeared, I heard from him again. He sent me a message on social media. Just a simple, "Hey, how are you?" Like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't destroyed my entire life and disappeared. I didn't respond right away. I showed the message to Dona Margarita. She told me the decision was mine, but that I should think carefully about what I wanted to get out of any conversation with him. I thought about it for a few days, and I realized I didn't want anything from him. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want the money back. I didn't want closure. I had already moved on. I had already built a new life, a better life. He had no power over me anymore. But I was curious. So I responded. I asked him where he'd been, what he'd been doing. He told me he'd been living in Rio de Janeiro. The investment he'd made with our money had failed. His friend had disappeared with all of it. Roberto had been left with nothing, just like me. He'd been working odd jobs, barely surviving. He said he was sorry. He said he'd made mistakes. He said he wanted to make things right. I could have been angry. Part of me wanted to be. But mostly I just felt sorry for him. Because while I had lost everything and rebuilt, he had lost everything and stayed lost. He was the same person, still making the same mistakes, still looking for the easy way out. I told him I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to let go of that anger. I told him I had moved on and built a good life for myself. I told him I hoped he would find his way eventually, but that it wasn't my responsibility to help him anymore. He asked if we could meet, if we could try again. I said no. That part of my life was over. That was 2 years ago now. I haven't heard from him since. And honestly, I don't think about him much anymore. Today, I'm doing better than I ever thought possible. The shop in Boa Viagem is thriving. Dona Margarita and I opened a fifth location last year, and I now own 30% of the overall business. I have my own apartment, a nice one, with a view of the ocean. I have savings again, more than Roberto and I ever had together. I have friends, real friends, who know my story and support me. But most importantly, I have something Roberto could never take away from me. I have the knowledge that I am capable of surviving anything, that I am stronger than I ever gave myself credit for, that I don't need someone else to define my worth or my future. Dona Margarita is still my mentor and my friend. She's in her 70s now and talks about retiring someday. When she does, I'll take over the business completely. The woman who helped me when I had nothing is trusting me with her life's work. That's not something I take lightly. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about what happened, if I'm bitter about the years I lost with Roberto, the money he stole, the trauma he caused. And the truth is, I'm not. Because if Roberto hadn't done what he did, I would probably still be that same person. Still settling for less, still believing I needed someone else to make me whole, still living a small, quiet life and calling it enough. What he did was terrible. It was cruel and selfish and wrong. But it also forced me to discover who I really was. It forced me to stand on my own 2 feet. It forced me to realize that I was capable of so much more than I believed. And in a strange way,
Meeting Donna Margarita on that beach that day was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Because she didn't just give me a job or a place to stay, she gave me hope. She showed me that it was possible to rebuild after everything falls apart. She showed me that the end of one story can be the beginning of an even better one. So, yes, my ex-husband took everything from me. But he also gave me the chance to start over, to build something real, to become the person I was always meant to be. And that's worth more than any amount of money he could have stolen. If you're going through something similar right now, if someone has betrayed you or taken advantage of you or left you with nothing, I want you to know something. You are stronger than you think. You are capable of more than you realize. And sometimes, the worst thing that ever happens to you can also be the thing that sets you free. Don't let someone else's choices define your future. You are more than what they did to you. You are more than the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And you have the power to rebuild, to start over, to create something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. It won't be easy. There will be days when you want to give up. Days when it feels like too much. But keep going. One day at a time. One small step at a time. And eventually, you'll look back and realize how far you've come. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll meet your own Donna Margarita along the way. Someone who sees your potential even when you can't see it yourself. Someone who gives you a chance when you need it most. And maybe someday, you'll be that person for someone else. That's the real victory. Not getting revenge on the people who hurt us, but becoming the kind of person who helps others heal from their wounds. That's how we break the cycle. That's how we make meaning out of suffering. Roberto never imagined that the person who would help me rise from the ashes would be a stranger on a beach. A woman who had walked the same path 30 years before. A woman who remembered what it felt like to lose everything, and who chose to use her success to lift someone else up. He probably thought I would crumble, that I would fall apart and never recover, that I would spend the rest of my life bitter and broken. And maybe if I hadn't met Donna Margarita that day, he would have been right. But life has a funny way of surprising us, of putting the right people in our path at exactly the right moment, of showing us that even in our darkest hours, there is still hope, still possibility, still a future worth fighting for. So, this is my story, the story of how I lost everything and found myself, the story of how a stranger's kindness changed my entire life, the story of how I learned that my worth was never tied to another person, and that I was always capable of standing on my own 2 feet. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. And remember, your story isn't over yet either. Hit subscribe if this story meant something to you.